So you'll see who we've got on the screen, but I'll also ask them all to briefly introduce themselves before we sort of kick off. We've got a couple of introductory questions for them, but then we're going to open it up to you all. So it's really important that you all get an opportunity to ask our panel the questions that are important to you and the ones that are burning in your mind. And then we'll also open it up to the people on the live stream online. So if you do have any questions and you're watching the live stream, please type your questions in and we'll try and take a selection of them in the room as well. So I'll just kind of pass this down the line. And if I can ask you all briefly to introduce yourselves. It might be super brief for you because I think everyone knows you now, but if you want to do a recap.
Yeah, so quick summary. My name's Jeremy Sutton. I work within the UK business at Microsoft, and I'm one of our sales leads within our healthcare business.
All right, yeah, so hi, I'm Holly. I am one of the Microsoft software engineers based out of London. I work on Microsoft Search Assistance and Intelligence, so products like File Explorer, the Start menu, the Edge new tab page, all sorts of those things. You might have run across at least one of those at some point. That's what I kind of do in my day job. I also am the founder of a platform called Her Hello World, where I help people get into technology careers and then be successful in those careers once they get there. So you can find me on platforms like Instagram and TikTok and a few others. I think that's probably good for now.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Okay, sure, sorry. Hi, I'm Pamela. I'm head of customer advocacy at Microsoft. So my team and I, we work with customers across all industries and segments to tell the story, how they use technology to innovate, transform their business, and empower people. So prior to that, I've had many different roles in marketing, in sales, and product, working for startups, and also some other global companies, including Amazon, MasterCard, Shell, and Oracle, where I had the chance to cover both local and global markets. I'm also a qualified coach, and for the last decade, I've been involved in a number of programs to empower people, particularly women. And I'm very grateful to be here today and look forward to the discussions.
I'm Jo. I'm a data engineer at Currency Cloud, which is a company owned by Visa. We have a very small data team, so everything is very hands-on where I work. It's tough but fun at sometimes.
Hi everyone, my name is Adebukola Sadolua. I'm a General Advanced Support Engineer at Oracle. I'm a generation graduate, and what we do in my team is we support businesses to choose the best Oracle solutions for innovations in their businesses, and it's nice to be here.
So I wonder if you could all briefly, you did touch on it, but briefly describe your journey into tech, maybe starting with what first sparked your interest. So you all come from quite varied backgrounds and varied roots. What first was the kind of light bulb that went, yes, I quite like the sound of going into tech?
Okay, since I have the mic. All right then. My background is in communications. I studied mass communication in Nigeria. And working in the communication field, I was able to work as a social media manager. And working as a social media manager, I worked directly with people involved in like the website designing, graphic designing, and that was where my interest came for tech first. I was like really interested in getting to know how is this website done? How do you do this? So that was the first time I had interest in tech. And then coming to the UK, I started working as a support worker, and I wasn't finding fulfillment in doing that. And I thought to myself, I wanted to do tech before when I was in Nigeria. Why not go ahead with this interest you had? And I started doing my research. I Googled, I watched YouTube videos, how to get into tech without a tech background. I came across Scrum Masters, Project Manager, and also cloud computing. And the one that piqued my interest the most was cloud computing. So I looked for ways to get into cloud computing, and then I came across Generations Bootcamp, and I applied, I got in, and yeah. I ended up as a support engineer at Oracle.
So I used to work in marketing, and then, so I'm originally from Germany, and I moved to the UK to work in marketing, and then the pandemic hit, and I lost my job because nobody really needs marketing. Sorry. If
Should I go?
I'm just
It's been a pleasure.
in the pandemic. For a small business in the pandemic. So I was looking for like another job, but like the applications was crazy. It was like 500 people for one role, and I was like, okay, it's really tough. What else could I do? And then I came across the Generation Bootcamp and was like, okay, I can try it and see how it goes. Never had anything to do with tech at all. So I tried it out, and it was tough at the beginning, but it was really worth it. Like, I'm so much more fulfilled in my job now, and it's like a challenge every day, and like the people you meet is really, really great. So yeah, that's kind of my journey.
So so I did study marketing, but I had many different roles, including now I've been heading up advocacy. So I'm originally from Brazil. I've been living in London for 15 years. As you probably can hear, I still have the accent. And I studied marketing, and I started my career in work in marketing financial services. And I enjoyed worked in Brazil, here in London as well. But I think for me, I really wanted to work in an industry where I could have a greater impact. And that's what I generally love about tech, right? Number one, you can work in tech across any functions, right? In the pure tech, or it could be HR, marketing, sales. But also, you can work in the tech function in any industry that you are passionate about. And I really love it, the fact that, in my job, because I work with customers, just to show how they use tech to transform lives. I have some stories where doctors use it, AI, and use some remote assist to save lives, or how some of the water companies are using technology to be more sustainable. Just to name some examples. So for me, what I love about tech is this, because everyone, every day is touched about it. And the opportunities are endless, including in marketing and advocacy. I couldn't go, no, it's good. It's good to have a bit of fun,
That's so
Come
funny.
on.
So for me, my interest in technology really came from the fact that I grew up playing games. I played a lot of video games with my dad, and I was just naturally interested in how to make these games. How can I make some for myself and share with my friends? But also kind of the point you touched on as well is it's always been really important to me to try to have a positive impact on the world and do that at scale. Thankfully, technology is a really good place to be able to do that. For exactly, again, the reasons that you mentioned, because it reaches across every single industry. So I first learned how to program at a C++ games programming camp. I think I was like 15 or 16, something like that. It was pretty tough. C++ is not really a language I would normally recommend people start with. But yeah, I was going to say, if people have been through it before, no. But we did it. I made my first game. It's very exciting. And then I followed that up with taking Java and web development classes in high school. After that, I took kind of a pretty traditional route. So I did computer science with business classes at university. So 75% computer science, 25% business. So I could get that, bit of a mixture, be able to communicate cross-discipline a little bit more. And when I leveled up in my career, I had some kind of foundational knowledge to build on the back of. So I did that. During my degree, I did a placement year. So that was when I first got my job at Microsoft. So I did 12 months on the same team I am now. So I was working on Paint 3D at the time, based in London. I followed that up with another 3 months in the Xbox team in Redmond. So that was where I got to finally work on kind of more in the gaming industry, which was super cool for me. At the end of that summer, I basically had 15 months work experience, which was really helpful. As well as 2 post-graduation job offers, 1 from each of my team. I ultimately decided I wanted to stay in London still, so I'm originally from Seattle. It seems like everybody here is not originally from the UK, which is kind of funny. But I decided I wanted to stay here, and so I've basically been on the same team ever since. But by the time I got back after my final year of university, my team had changed focus on their projects. We weren't working on Paint 3D anymore. We were working on Microsoft Search Assistants and intelligence across all these different platforms. So I think that's pretty much how I've gotten to where I am now.
Thank you. And I am from the UK. I'm from Essex. And for those that know, you know, because my accent is particularly strong, which I'm very proud of. But I wish I could say my journey into tech was as considered as all of those. I fell into it like a lot of people do. And similar to Holly, I went to university and I did a placement year. And 14, 15 years ago, I specifically said I'll go anywhere. I'll go anywhere to do my placement other than a tech company. Because I was like, it'll be boring, full of men, like, oh, why would I want to do that? But what was more important to me was that I was at Nottingham Trent University and I wanted to stay living so that I could still have fun. That was my view. You know, I mean, I work 5 days a week, live with my mates, have a laugh, off we go, you know, a bit of experience with it. So I applied to a company called Fujitsu. And Fujitsu, it was based, I remember, in Sutton upon Ashton, or Ashton upon Sutton. And it was 40 minutes from Nottingham. So I was like, amazing, smash that. Got the job, based in Reading, which for anyone that doesn't know, is about a 2.5 hour drive one way from that. So clearly my dreams not to work in tech and to stay local didn't happen, but I worked in the sales function. So just to add some weight to what Pamela said earlier, the UK tech economy employs over 5 million people in different roles, from technical roles like you've heard, from marketing, HR and sales, like where I've always been. So what lured me to stay into tech was that I was there for about 3 months and they kept talking about the channel, which is basically how you sell from business to business in technology. And I was like, what is this channel? And I remember my boss sitting down and chatting to me about it, and I was like, this is actually quite interesting, you know. Like, I might be selling tech, but I like this. I like the way this works. So I then spent the next 9, 10 months working there, and it was from there that I got the bug for working in tech. So don't worry. I would say actually for some of the things you've heard, if you're like, oh, I don't love something yet, where do I go? There are all of these options. There are so many options in tech, and not all of them are obvious. They don't always say computer science at the front of them. Because yes, certainly, I consider myself a business woman that works in technology. I don't consider myself a technologist. So that's where I got here. Slight tangent, I apologise.
No, I love that. We love a tangent. Okay, I'm going to ask the panel one more question, then we're going to open up to the room. So my question for you then, we don't necessarily need everybody to answer everything, but why do you think it's important for more women to join the tech industry? Now, I mean, we're probably preaching to the choir here today. I'm going to pass Pamela first because you expressed a real interest in answering, and then we can pass back to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sure. So I think it is, so if you look from a business perspective, right? So research shows that if a company has balance, right, between men and women and diversity in general, it can be more innovative, it can be more inclusive, it can provide better products and services to customers. Therefore, the sales and revenue grow. But despite all of that, I think it's still sad to see that only 10% of the Fortune 500 companies have a woman as their CEO. And also, if you look at the venture capital, right, the VC space, the funding available the last few years has increased. Whereas the funding going to women, to kind of female-only team, has decreased from 3% to 1% since 2018. And I think the number goes even lower if you look at minority. So just some of the stats, right? So I think it's an interesting one because the benefit for women in tech, is inclusive, right? I think women, we have a lot of skills to add as well, right? That perhaps men don't have so much. And it's amazing for the bottom line of the economy of the company, but still there is a bit of imbalance. And I know we're going to discuss it in a little bit. So just some food for thoughts for now.
I mean, agree, right? Like, you said it wonderfully. And there is the economic benefit to companies in doing it, but, 50% of the population in every geography is female. We have a different way of thinking, a different way of acting. It's not just about women as well, it's also about ethnicity. It's about some of those life experiences we bring. When we think about the products that we serve, and I'll just talk about it from a Microsoft perspective, we don't serve one demographic. Like in anywhere at any point, everybody uses what we do. So therefore, if we only have people who look, think and feel the same creating those, how are we creating something that can resonate with everyone and have the same impact? It is absolutely crucial that we are creating opportunities for women that work in tech because we need that perspective. We bring something that 50% of the population simply can't. We think in a different way. Pamela mentioned some brilliant stats that I mentioned earlier. You know, only 1% of women in board positions are from ethnic minorities, for instance. Well, we know that statistically there's far more than that just in the UK. So why aren't we reflecting at least bare minimum the averages that we should be at? So I'm not going to stand on my soapbox for too long on this because we'll be here till about 7 p.m. But incredibly important, if we want to have the impact that we want to have in society, we must reflect the communities that we serve. End of.
I think the only thing I want to add to that, because you guys have basically made the point, is when we think about these technologies and when we're building these technologies, you have to have the people that you're trying to represent on the teams making the decisions. Those are where the decision-making processes are happening, and so you have to have them on the team. I've even just raised bugs in my daily life that have somehow gotten past X amount of people until I see them. I'm like, I don't think this is the right thing to do. And as soon as you raise it, it gets resolved. But you needed somebody to raise that point at somewhere along the chain, and that's really what we're here to do. I think a great example is, as we're moving into, as technology is becoming ever more pervasive as it continues to. We've all just seen the latest ChatGPT and GPT, OpenAI, all of these things. Like, look at how much more pervasive technology is going to become in our daily lives across every single industry once again. And so it becomes super, super important that in those decisions, everybody is being considered. And I think the only way you're going to be able to do that and build products and services designed with everybody in mind is if everybody in mind is doing the designing. I don't know if any of you guys want to pass it back.
So we're going to open up to the room now. So does anyone feel brave and have a question for our panel if you want to pop your hand up? You shout it out and I'll repeat it onto the mic.
Basically, everybody has talked about, apart from one person, everybody seems to have been someone that relocated into UK and either transitioned also into tech, except the lady that went to university. Please, can you just give, as much as you're giving us a journey plan of it, which sounds so fairy tale and all, tell us some challenges that faced and how you conquered it as you embarked on working in tech. And for the first speaker, you've talked about how never wanted to work in a male-dominated environment, because I'm sure some of the ladies here, they want to work in a place where they will feel very comfortable, where they feel that even though they don't bring the highest amount of knowledge base into the job role, but they are accepted and they're able to grow and learn. So please just enlighten us on those two things.
Hey, an amazing two-part question that I'm just going to repeat for the benefit of the live stream as well. So we had the first question here, and we got a few sort of knowing smiles about maybe it wasn't a fairy tale for everybody when you were relocating, but what kind of challenges did you face on the road to where you are now? And crucially, kind of how did you cope with them? How did you overcome them, or how are you still overcoming them? And then secondly, given that we know from the stats that this is a very male-dominated industry, any advice or guidance or tips for how do you feel comfortable in that space? So perhaps you want
to I work in a very much fintech startup kind of company that got recently acquired by Visa, so the corporate lifestyle is slowly trickling into the company, but it's still very much a startup. Like, we have scooters and everything in the office, like, you imagine it. But it's tough sometimes. Like, if you go in those meetings and you're the only woman and there are 20 people on that call and they're just all men and they've been in the industry for 10, 15 years, and you just sit there with your 2 years experience, you're like, can I even say something? It's sometimes very, very intimidating, and it's not easy. You have to stand your ground, especially you don't have any other woman in your team that can support you and be oh, I understand what you're going through. Because unfortunately, men just sometimes don't understand. They don't have this special emotional intelligence that women have. They just understand each other, which men don't. And they're like, this is his problem, just do it. And I was like, but it's the way how you communicate that I think sometimes I still get offended by. And I was like, oh, why is he so mean? But it's just somehow how men communicate. They're just like, just do it, it's okay. So I think it's something you really have to get used to, and it's not easy. I remember on my first day in the boot camp, I was just like, oh my God, this is so intense. Everything you learn, you learn a new language like Python, personally what I learned. You learn so many foundations about my job and data engineering. I remember I was just crying at the end of the day, and I was like, I can't do this. This is so hard. Like, this is not easy. And like, I still have those days where I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. Like, it's just a lot to do, especially because I'm in a small team. Like, we're only 3 people. We still think like, oh my God, this is so tough. Like, I wish I had somebody else to understand like what I'm going through. So that's the reason I'm also like passionate about like going to networking events for women in tech, where you can talk through just with other women, be like, oh yeah, you understand what I'm going through. And it's just really nice. So it can be tough, but as long as you are like active and like you're trying to like reach out to other women and be like, is it the same for you? Maybe it's just my company, and like be the change you want to see in tech. I think it's a good like step of just overcoming that initial like hardness that you see and be like, oh my God, this is so exhausting. But if I could go back, I would still like make the exact same decisions as I did now. Like, I'm super happy, but sometimes it is just tough, unfortunately. But that's life. But I still enjoy it very much. Anyone else?
Talking about the challenges, I would say when applying to the bootcamp, at some point I almost gave up. I was like, we had this series of, you can test to see if this course is for you. And at some point, I wanted to give up, but the mentor that was available then, I spoke with her. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go for the green, the retrofit course instead. And she asked, why do I want to go for that? Because she saw that, I did quite well in my Python labs and stuff like that. But I saw that I was like, I can't do. I think maybe it was the imposter syndrome. I was feeling like, oh no, this is not for me. I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. But I insisted when the mentor spoke to me. I said, okay, I'm going to do this. She was really helpful then, and I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put my mind to it, because it was a lot. We're taking in so much information coming from a no tech background at all. I knew nothing about tech. From zero. So it was very, very tough for me then. And then getting on my job, I get to learn new things. I get to start on my own. I know that, I needed to start from the scratch. I needed to know the basics of computer science. I did that on my own, because I knew that there was sometimes we go on a meeting and then there are some terms people start talking about, and I know nothing about that. So I just decided to, okay, on your own, this is what you can do to tackle these challenges. Do self-learning, do some self-learning on your own. And I was able to, I just started my job in January. Yeah, so it's still a learning phase for me. So even in tech, you keep learning. You learn every day. You do not stop learning. So that's one way to tackle the challenge. Yeah.
Just very quickly. So while talking about challenges, so I moved from Brazil to London to learn English. So I didn't speak English fluently. I was on a student visa. I had no contacts here. And actually, it was my first trip outside Brazil ever. I didn't even go to Argentina. But you guys know, right? If you're Brazilian, we don't really go to Argentina. But but jokes apart. So that it was a challenge itself, right? And I was supposed to stay here to study, go back. I love London. Okay, I said I want to stay here, and to cut a long story short, I create my plan, and then by myself, I learned the language. I did a postgraduate. My grandfather was Italian, so I was able to get the citizenship. No, I did not get married for passport purposes. Actually, I didn't get married at all, but that's another conversation. And so it was hard. It was tough. I was studying. I was, in Brazil, I had a job as a marketing manager, but here I start from the beginning. I did unpaid internships. I did a lot of courses, but I was like, I have my plan. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to get there. Wasn't easy? Hell no. I got a lot of no's. It's very difficult. I had no family here, no support system. But I genuinely believe that if you have a goal and you break it to small steps, you can tackle the challenges. So here, some of the key takeaways, the 3 areas that I love you to consider, whether you are in the room or in the live stream. 1 is the skills. It's very important to continue. And actually, stats shows that by the next 5 years or so, 94% of us will have to change our skills to a certain degree. Okay, so there we go, skills. And you have here the opportunity, right, to get into the boot camp. ticked. Second one, find a mentor. And they're going to say, Pamela, but I'm not in tech, I'm not working, how I get a mentor? Well, again, there's so many platforms that you can find a mentor. One of them is TechHer, that is from Microsoft, and you can join. There are courses, free training. There's also, you can find a mentor to that. And third, I think it's a time for us to take responsibility as well. Okay, because yes, there's a government, yes, it's a male-dominated industry, but we as a woman, when you have a chance, you have to speak up. Okay, you have to ask for. When I coach and mentor people, they say, "Oh, I'm not getting promoted." Did you tell your boss you want to get promoted? No. I was like, well, so feel the fear and do it anyway. Apply for the job. Reach out to the person. Ask for the mentor. Because guess what? If you don't ask, you're not going to get. So yes, there is a government that has to help. There is society, but it's also our responsibility to take charge. Thank you.
Snaps to that, yeah.
I mean,
Let's go, ladies, let's go.
I do have an extra point to add to that, which is, yes, we've got to be bold and we've got to be brave, right? And that comes as the drive bit that I mentioned earlier. But I also think there's a responsibility on the companies and the men, and it is mostly men that lead these companies, to make a space for us to feel like we can belong. Because it's one thing, these companies having these roles available, wanting to be more diverse, they've all got quotas, they have to do it by the government, they're all improving, it's going in the right direction. But if you get into a company and you work in a team of all men, which is very possible, especially if it's a technical role, they have to think about how they can make you feel included, how they can bring you into these conversations, how they can support you with those. Because what we'll find is that you won't stay. And you'll feel like tech is not for you. And all of these old stereotypes that you've heard previously around, oh, that's a men's thing, boys do that, that's just going to reinforce that. So whilst I absolutely agree, put your neck on the line and tell your boss and ask for the help and really push yourself out there, look for the companies that have employee resource groups. Look for those that make a stand. Look for those that, well, all the big companies should be publicising their stats around gender pay gaps, for instance, because those are the ones that are making a stand, and those are the ones where you feel once you're in the door, you're going to feel like you should be there. And that's what we want. We don't want women to have a go and feel like they're excluded. We want you to be there in 5 years' time. So yes, do all of those things, but also do your research on the companies, because there is a responsibility for them to make a workplace and an environment where we feel like we can not just survive, but that we can thrive.
Amazing, thank you. So we'll open it up again to the room, and perhaps while we're doing that, we can have a look at the live stream as well to see if there's any questions that are coming through there. So we've got any other questions from the room at the moment? Yes, you had to shout nice and loudly for us. Yeah, great question. So for the benefit of the live stream, the question is, particularly to Adi here, like why cloud engineering and not another area of tech, or why particularly not software engineering? I have to pass this down the trough.
Okay, like I said before, coming from a no-tech background, I did my research, and I know that I'm not good at, I don't like coding so much. I don't like it. Yeah, so when I searched, and then I saw that you don't need to have too much of coding experience to do this. And that was why I went for the cloud computing one. Although that you have to use some Python, Linux and stuff. Yeah, but for me, even when on the boot camp, our mentor said, okay, write down the kind of role you want in cloud. Because even in cloud, there are different roles. There are roles that you don't have to code. Yeah? So what I wrote down was I wanted a support role in cloud, because I know my weakness. I know my strength is not in coding. So I said I wasn't going to go that route at all. So I went for cloud computing, and then I'm in a support role in Oracle now in the cloud infrastructure team. Yeah, so that was why I went for the cloud computing one, because I didn't want to do so much that has to do with coding, if you get that. Yeah. coding, but you have to have basic knowledge of the skills. But I didn't want to make it like my main aspect of being in tech, doing coding jobs. Okay, so I'm an advanced support engineer. So we support businesses. We tell them, oh, this Oracle solution is best for you. So we tell them which Oracle solution to choose. And then as a cloud, I'm in the cloud infrastructure team as well. So we can also architect, design their cloud infrastructure. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we've got one from the live stream.
What can you do or options are there for people who are working but would like to take part in the boot camps or people looking for a career change? So maybe what are the non-full-time options?
Yep. Okay. So I can probably take that one briefly. I'm not sure. Probably not for the panel as such. But so as we kind of talked about before, Generation Bootcamp specifically are for those people who are either unemployed or on 0-hour contracts, or who are on very unstable employment, who want to kind of take a break from that and then do something a bit different. There are lots of kind of part-time opportunities available, and what I would recommend the person who asked the question do is, if you do a quick Google for Ollie's organisation, which is the London Digital and Tech Skills Hub. If you have a look there, that is a collective of lots of different organisations like Generation who offer training provision in particularly the tech and digital space, but not all of them are exactly the same as like boot camps. So they're slightly different pathways into tech, and some of those will be part-time opportunities, some of them will be a bit more like flexible, like flexi time. Boot camps are one way of doing it, but that organisation or that collective of organisations has a wider variety of different routes into tech, some of which, as I said, are kind of part-time or a little bit more flexible if you do have employment already that you want to keep. So I think we then had another... Oh, yes, of course. Go for it.
Okay, so while on the boot camp, I wasn't working Monday to Fridays. You don't need to have... I was working like 16 hours weekend. I knew I wanted to do this, but we had bills to pay. We needed to work. So what I did was I had to work. I needed to sacrifice my Saturday and Sunday. So I was working Saturday and Sunday. So if it's something you could give your Monday to Friday, we have bills. There are bills to be paid. So I did Saturdays and Sundays. I was able to work just Saturdays and Sundays, but not up to the maybe 20 hours or something, but something to bring some money in. Okay.
I do have a question. It's a very specific one, kind of like why I came here. So I think I'm a bit different from like most of the people here. I study computer science, I'm final year, and it happens that I'm working with lots of Microsoft technologies. So my question would go to Holly. I was wondering, apart from the official ASP.NET documentation, do you know some other outlets of information on certain packages, on certain things? It's basically because there's a lot of things that I'm trying to do, and there's so very little documentation, and I think people at Microsoft know where to find the information. So I was like, okay, let me just come here, find someone I could ask the question and just do that. And then just apart from that, I wanted to say something. Women in the tech industry, like choosing to study computer science and doing all these, doing these things, I've noticed personally that, around high school, around this like earlier time in life, like women tend to really shy away from technology. They tend to be thinking, this is kind of like not great. And then I find myself, for example, in my school, there's like 210 of us, and then the 10 are women. So I really encourage like initiatives like this one to get a lot more women into the tech space and stop thinking this is uncool, because it's literally the most badass thing you could ever do in your life. Like if you're thinking you can't do this, I'm like for sure 100% there's like no reason why you can't. Like I was the student that didn't get straight A's, whatever, and I'm graduating in a couple months for computer science, and I'll get like some other place with it. So I really think women just need to have the balls to do it. just go ahead.
So we'll pass that to Holly to answer the first question, and then maybe link to the second sort of points you're making, like super valid points you're making. Maybe link to that, then a question would be, what kind of advice would you give to either your younger self or someone, a woman or a girl, who is at that point of sort of making decisions or coming away or thinking they want to come away from those sort of more traditionally masculine subjects, you know? So either to yourself as a younger version of yourself or someone in your life.
Yeah, so in terms of documentation, I pretty much use the same documentation that you do as well, just a lot of the online stuff. I would say I have found that like learning platforms like Udemy is actually my favorite learning platform. I find they're pretty cheap and the quality is pretty high. There's loads of free options as well, like LinkedIn Learning, and you know, Udacity does some free stuff, EDX does some free stuff as well, and they're all great. But I personally just resonate really well with Udemy stuff. So if you're not finding what you need in the documentation, some of those online courses might also just help kind of point you through and give you some examples of how to actually implement some of these stuff. W3 Schools might also have some examples as well, because I know they started as more of a web-based platform, but have really expanded in the languages that they show and give loads of examples about how to do certain things or how to use different components. So I would take a look at those. Fortunately, we're all kind of in the same boat a little bit. I guess at Microsoft, I get the benefit of sometimes for certain things, I can look at the source code for behind the scenes, but that's not public information. So, but the second question though about, you know, I guess what we would tell our younger selves, you know, the question about that we kind of had previously about the challenges. I think when I reflect back on my journey, one of my biggest challenges was dealing with imposter syndrome. Not sure if everybody here has heard the term imposter syndrome. I know when I first heard it finally years later, it gave me a lot of, you know, solace, or like it made me feel a lot better knowing that other people were experiencing it too. It's basically the feeling that, you know, either you got where you were because of luck or convenience, or maybe you don't deserve your opportunities, or you're not smart enough, all those kind of critical thoughts in the back of your mind that you should really be ignoring. For me, it really came to fruition, you know, the C++ game programming camp, I was one of 2 girls in that. It was C++, it was super hard. It made me really question whether or not computer science was really something for me. Doing Java and web development was a lot nicer, and so that gave me some confidence. But again, was this something that I wanted to do and spend my whole time kind of investing the next 4 years into? But really, it came to a peak in my placement year. I'm a massive Microsoft fangirl, at least I grew up doing that. So finally to like get this role, my dream job in the industry, massive waves of imposter syndrome. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm here now. I'm working with these people who have been doing this for 10 plus years, who made the games that I grew up playing. Like, how can I possibly be on the same team? And, you know, being one of the only female engineering interns on my team, I was like, was I here as a diversity hire? You know, that was in the back of the mind as well. So I think, like you mentioned, definitely there were some tears. But I think I grew so much in that year, and I look back on my imposter syndrome as probably one of the best things that could have happened, strangely, because by the end of the year, I went through this whole process of, you know, being confronted with a challenge I didn't know how to do. You know, learning something, working with my mentors, overcoming it, building it, delivering it, and seeing, you know, time and time again, even if I didn't know how to do something at the start, by the end, I would be able to figure it out and deliver it. And it wasn't that the confidence that, you know, like, my tech skills are perfect, I know how to do every single thing. Like, that's just not how the technology industry works. You are always going to be learning. But it was the confidence in the fact that I knew that I would be able to learn what I needed to learn and be able to deliver it. And so it's the confidence in the underlying self that really helped me. And now I look at my imposter syndrome as really a sign that it's a good thing. I am challenging myself, I'm putting myself in new situations, and I'm going to grow through them and become better than I would have before. So if you're encountering or experiencing imposter syndrome, know that it's probably a good thing, know that 80% of people, I suspect that figure is much higher, have also experienced imposter syndrome. Know that I have given a whole talk on imposter syndrome at a TechHer conference at Microsoft, and every single woman in the room nodded their heads when I mentioned the fears around imposter syndrome and being a diversity hire and stuff like that. It doesn't matter if you're an intern or a CEO, every single person has experienced it at some point, and I think I get a lot of confidence by realizing that most people are just faking it until they make it, and basically you can too, and if you can learn, that's really all you need to do to be successful in this industry.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you said that piece and that you centred that question at Holly, because I would have known where to start in trying to help you with that. And I'm also glad I've had some time to think, because I think it's really easy with hindsight to go, what would I do differently? What would I tell young Jeremy? And I think the reason it's a hard question is because for a lot of people, when I was younger, bearing in mind your stereotypes around what a girl does, what a boy does, is formed by about 8. So actually a lot of change needs to take place in the education sector, because if you're not seeing what can be actually when you're learning as young as primary school, then it's really difficult by the time you get exposed to secondary school and you get access to more technical courses and coding. You've already made up your mind, that's not for me. So there's a lot of systemic stuff that needs to happen, but I really agree with the points around imposter syndrome. And when you went, we've all experienced it, I'm like, experiencing, like every day. Exactly. We're all going to be experiencing this, because when you are growing, you're naturally doing something that makes you uncomfortable. And I think when you add the fact that you might have different challenges that sit behind that to just naturally make you feel less self-confident, it's going to be part and parcel of what you do, and how you feel in the workplace. I really liked what you said as well, Holly, around fake it till you make it. And I truly, truly believe that. And I don't mean like, don't try and build a house if you've never picked up a trowel before. I mean, clearly there's a fine line, but there is an inner confidence that you can build in yourself by going, I don't know, but I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to try, and I'm going to see what happens. And what's the worst that can happen? I fail. At the end of the day, it's a job. Odds are in technology, nothing that serious is going to happen. No one is going to die. So actually trial and error is part of what we do every day. So even when you're like, this is my worst day, I feel terrible, bad night's sleep, kids have kept me up, I'm knackered, like I'm 3 weeks in, everyone hates me, don't know what I'm doing. Okay, that might not be true, but you know what? I'm just going to put a brave face on. I'm going to put a bit of lippy on, shove a smile on, have a cup of coffee, and I'm going to get through the next half an hour. I'm going to get through the next half day, next day. And actually by doing that, you start to chip away at that voice telling you can't do it, and you start to build that confidence in saying, yeah, I can. And if I could do it at my worst, what am I capable of when I'm absolutely at my best? So keep faking it. And if you haven't looked up imposter syndrome, you don't know what it does, I really encourage you to go online, go on Bing. You can tell I work for Microsoft. Yeah. And have a look, because I wish I'd known what that meant when I started my career, and actually I didn't have a clue. And it's one of the reasons I hid that I was from Essex for a long time, because I thought people would think I was thick. And actually get that out of your head, have a look and see how you can help yourself no matter what career you go into.
Amazing. Anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you guys. Just share. I guess, if I have to give an advice to my younger self, I actually would say be kind to yourself. Because I guess, the different phases. So for example, right, one of the analogies that, we can be on the comfort zone, we can be on the stretch zone, or we can be on the panic zone. And if I'm very honest, I always been, my entire life, always being very driven and ambitious. And I've been, I think, on the panic zone a lot of the time. I think, in the sense that pushing myself and what is next and more responsibility, which is great, right? So I'm not disencouraging you, not at all. But I do have to say, I think sometimes it's okay to say, you know what? I'm okay for now. I just needed maybe 1 or 2 years in this role, and then I go to the next one, right? Because I think it's about finding the balance, right? Not just being the comfort zone, right? I mean, you might, but, for a while it's okay, but that's not going to help you to grow, right? The stretch zone, that's where the sweet spot is, because you're still comfortable, but we're growing. The panic zone, again, is good to be from time to time, but not all the time. So I generally think that sometimes we, particularly women, we tend to be really hard on ourselves, right? We're like, oh my God, I should already, know this. I should have that qualification. I should have that job. I mean, it's great to be ambitious and have a plan, but be kind to yourself, and to my phone as well. But generally, and I would say, yes, it's great ambition, Pamela, but I feel like sometimes perhaps I push myself a little bit harder than I should. So yes, have ambition, but also be kind to yourself, because trust me, you are doing great.
On that, it's really, really great. It's so true, because I think you're always your biggest critic yourself. Like, you just look at yourself and like, oh, was this actually good enough? Could I be any better? So I was reading a book, and the woman was saying, like, just look at it like you're your 4-year-old like self, and you just look at them and you say all the things, like all the mean things you say to yourself to that 4-year-old girl. Would you still say those things? No, you wouldn't. And that really helped me of like having like a visual image of be like, I shouldn't be so hard on myself. Like, I was just a child. I am just a child still. Like, I'm so young, and like I'm just into the journey of my tech career. It's like, I don't need to know everything right now. Like, I have time. I can rely on like peers and like strong women in leadership, that have like all the experience and all like did all the fights you still have to do. But you can ask them questions and make it like feel a little bit easier and be like, okay, I'm not the only one that has to go through that. It's not comfortable, but at least, you're not alone, and you can always have like the supportive network of like women that are so strong and like great leaders and like great examples. You can just look up to and be like, when I'm growing up, I want to be like her. So that just really helped me of being like, just look at other people, they're struggling as well, and you can struggle together.
I think the last thing I would add is that, particularly working at Generation, we come across people of all ages, and I think growing up, you're told that by the time of 21 or 25 or 30, you're supposed to know what you want to do when you grow up. I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up, and that's okay. And we get people of all ages coming in who either have changed their mind or have suddenly had a light bulb moment, or just don't know what they want to do when they grow up even more, and that's okay. I think we've got time for one more question, if we have one in the room. Yeah, do you want to shout it out nice and loud for me? Okay, so I think if we're taking that with a bit more broadly, and thank you so much for that question, is, and this might be one for you, Holly, potentially, because I think you found it, Don't Work in Business. I'm not sure we've got anyone here who has kind of started. Yeah, a little bit. Okay, so the question was kind of any advice to someone who's looking to maybe start a business in tech, or I think specifically you said fintech, but let's think about maybe tech more broadly, like any advice for someone who maybe would want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, look, first of all, congratulations on your bravery. I think it's a hard journey to go down, but ultimately it can be super, super rewarding. My only bit of advice is find people to help you, because every business that exists started with one person and an idea, and there are so many grassroots companies out there who support founders onwards with that journey, with everything from creating your business case all the way through to pitching for investment, all the way through to 2 years' time, what does that look like, and what are my HR policies. So find those networks to support you, because I think doing it on your own, irrespective of the industry and the focus that you've got, and no matter how good your service or solution is, you're going to find it really, really difficult. But there are loads of companies out there, and there's also, for those that are particularly good, lots of investment opportunities as well from companies like other tech companies. Cool, I nearly inadvertently technology swore then, but other tech companies out there who would be looking to invest. So do your research, not just into your idea, but also to what some of their mentoring companies are, because they will help demystify the process, but also from a tech standpoint, give you that insight into kind of how it works and how they pave their way through. So look for those organisations, and afterwards I can tell you about a couple of the ones that I know of. But I'm not an expert, but that'd be my guidance.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you were saying you were trying to get into the business side, but starting a business is a bit different. There's definitely loads of organizations in London or based in the UK that will help specifically women or people of color, or just in general that are just about entrepreneurship and starting like starting startups. London is a big place for that, so I have quite a few friends who have started their own startups. You know, they've gone to various levels of that process, but there are definitely groups out there, and that is probably the first place I would go, like do like an accelerator program or try to find some mentorship, because it is a whole space. In terms of, I guess, my business, it's not technically an official business yet, but Her Hello World, it's probably grown to the point now where you could kind of consider it a business. And the thing that I try to tell people who are thinking about starting at least something similar, and I think this, advice applies regardless of what business you're doing, is I find a lot of people, especially women, let perfectionism get to them, and so they feel like they have to figure every single problem out right, like before they start, and so they basically never get started in the first place. Or this idea that they don't know exactly how to do something, and so, feel like they need to learn a million things before they get started. And it just ends up pushing you back really far in terms of like your timelines. It also means that you're kind of solving for problems that you might actually not really ever run into, or that you would learn the solution better by just going through the process yourself. So with Her Hello World, and even, my sister's starting a business, and I've been kind of like half coaching her through that. It's really about those, incremental steps that you can take to get it further and further out. What is your MVP? What is your MLP, your minimum lovable product? How can you keep building on those levels, to get out faster, to get user feedback sooner, to kind of prove out this idea, because I don't think it's worth waiting until you have this perfect polished process. If we're thinking, don't do the waterfall method, do the agile method is basically what I'm suggesting here. Maybe you have some other thoughts.
No, sounds great. So I think some other points here. I think it's important, of course, to understand the macro environment, right? So what is your total addressable market, what your competition is doing, and then, I think as you rightly said, understand if there is appetite for your solution, right? What pain are you trying to solve? However, I think sometimes if you are innovating, right, if you come up with a new idea, people might not be ready for that. So you need to know how to ask the right questions. I love this quote by Henry Ford, right, who founded Ford Motors years ago. He said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So it's interesting, right? Because if you want to innovate it, you need to be mindful, okay, is that a market for it? Are people ready? If not, great. You can go and innovate, right? Perhaps there's something that no one expected and you can bring to market. And I think the third point, it is really about it, which I think the panel touched on already, is, find someone that has gone through this journey already. Right? And they don't need to be officially your mentor, right? You can even just reach out to LinkedIn or in an event and say, hey, and most people will be surprised, even the senior ones, if you're very specific what you want, they will find the time for you. Say, hey, I want to, half an hour or 45 minutes, whatever it is of your time. These are the things. And it's very important. Also, one thing that sometimes we forget is your support system. Right? And whether it is your family and your friends or your community, it's just so important, because all journeys have ups and downs, even more so if you're an entrepreneur, right? If you're a woman, if you want to innovate. So having people that is like, okay, you were doing great, let's go, is really important, for the short, medium, and long term.
Two last things to mention really quick. Some really good frameworks that I was taught during my entrepreneurship classes at university. This is why I like taking those business classes as well. Is the business model canvas and the lean startup method. Those are literally just like templates and formats to go through, and that was something that I found really valuable at the start of creating Her Hello World, because it helped me kind of figure out what my USP was, what value I was adding, and kind of just go through that process. So it's the lean startup method and the business model canvas. I would look those up.
All right, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're just about out of time, so could I ask you all to just join me in thanking our wonderful panel? Very much. And thank you all for your questions as well. So hopefully, at least some of our panel will be able to hang around for a little while until we finish the next session, so that you can have a chat with them and ask them any more burning questions that you might have But thank you once again, ladies, and we'll see you very shortly. So feel free to sort of make your way to that.